is bringing that up. Oh, of course, now it's at 96% complete, but you never know what that means. Well, John is bringing this up. There's been a lot of speculation. Paul is very active on social media. I'm not as active, but you know, we have people that are questioning, what does this mean? Or the, you know, biggest question really is the government see less tax revenue? Are they just going to increase our taxes? How does it affect the government? And really, it varies from county to county. We have different revenue streams. We have different expenses. It varies from city to city and state to state. State government is different than county government. We have different revenue streams. And so I wanted to do an impact analysis. To be clear, I'm not predicting the future. Really, the point of this is I wanted to show what sources of revenue that we have that we rely on are sensitive to market downturns, and what revenues are not sensitive that we can rely on, and really some different scenarios as to how this could potentially impact the county. We run, at one point we're up to about a $50 million budget. Now we're down to about a $46 million budget. And so we want to keep an eye on this and make sure we don't get caught shorthanded and behind the curve trying to react too late and have to do layoffs or something like that. We want to keep an eye on things as they come down the pike at us. So having said that, so this is online as well. Mm-hmm. Okay.
Yeah, they can hear you, but they can see that.
So this is our new reality, as we all know. I refer to it as this. We're all living in this separate side reality, but we don't get to choose. We have a lot of uncertainty, and not to just ask a bunch of questions, but I want to point out the things that are still uncertain. And I'm not going to try and predict them, but I want to point out the things that could potentially affect the economy and local governments. Number one thing is how long will the social distancing and other preventative measures last? How gradual will they be released? When will a vaccine or other treatments be introduced to combat the virus? Will the summer temperatures effectively stop the virus, and will it resurge in the fall, and to what effect? You know, and I'm not going to get into speculating on the biology or the virus stuff. We're just simply talking about the economic fallout. But of course, these are totally related. The policies and the public psyche affect our financial situation. How long will the economy be in a deep freeze? And I use the analogy that, you know, the longer that we are frozen.
Sorry. They were trying to get it on there.
The longer we artificially freeze the economy, you know, the more tissue, if you will, the analogy, that will be lost due to frostbite. What will it look like on the other side? You know, I watch the stock market and all of the articles, and you know, the leaders of these big firms that are running models. You know, yet last week we had the stock market went on a 5-day upward tear with all this negative news, and then over the weekend we had positive news about OPEC Plus coming to an agreement. And what happens? The stock market dives. It's very erratic, and so nobody really knows. But what we do know is, on the other side of this, what is going to be there? Earnings, as they start to come in, are going to give the markets a wake-up call. And how many people will go back to life as normal once we get over the COVID-19, whether it's by vaccine or whether it's by herd immunity or whether it's by relaxing of social distancing? Will people spend like they used to spend, or will they be more conservative with their spending? So about 70% of America's GDP is made up of consumer spending, and consumers are fickle, right? What is their psyche going to be at the end of this? Are they going to be wanting to save because they remember what they dealt with, Are they going to have a bunch of pent up demand? They're going to go out and spend. They're going to go to the restaurants in mass, or are they going to be more reticent to wait? Are they going to continue to build that new house that they were looking at? Or are they going to do a wait and see? If everybody goes into a wait and see mode, then what happens is it literally creates the recession. It's like it's a downward spiral. And then as businesses don't have the revenue, then they have to lay off more. That's how recessions start. It's a domino effect. So everybody at the first of this was hoping that we could get over this very quickly and we could just unpause and go back to the way it was. The question is what does that look like as we slowly unthaw? What will fear and uncertainty look like? Another big unknown is we are pumping trillions of dollars into the economy. That is going out to stimulus packages. That's going out to weird earmarks. But a good chunk of that is going to the American people. And will that effectively give us a pause button? What will happen with those dollars? Will people spend those dollars? Will other people pay their mortgage? We didn't have that. So with the last 2008 recession, we did a bunch of bailouts, but they went to big banks, they went to automotive, but they didn't go necessarily to the populace. So we'll talk a little bit about that in a minute. So there's a lot of debate as to what the shape of the recession will look like and the duration. So basically you have a V, which everybody at the front end was hoping, the economists, which means it was going to bounce down for a quarter and then bounce right back to where it was and continue. A U is going to be like a multi-year thing where we see this large dip that ultimately comes back. An L is the worst case scenario, and that's where it just drops and it never bounces back. It just takes a new line horizontally out. Or a W or an X or a Q, you know, I mean, you can think about all these different things. I think you're going to see the stock market looks like a W on steroids where it's bouncing all over the place. And then, of course, to give a nod to our old Secretary of the Defense, what are the unknown unknowns? With the ripple effects, you know, down the road, we'll say, oh, well, we should have seen the fact that this was brewing, you know. You had this morning a pork supplier announced that it closed its factory. What are going to be the repercussions for that in farming? And I mean, there's all these ripple effects that move throughout the economy, and this is just a huge shock. And so it's hard. It's easy to see the things that are right in front of our face, but it's hard to know the side effects that are going to circle back around with this industry or that industry, or this shortage of materials is going to affect this supply line, which is going to then put a specific industry out of business or cause them to have to change and innovate. Anyways, so getting on to Iron County. John, I've lost control.
Oh, that's because, oh, hey, you're going through my emails. Good job.
Hey.
All right, try, no, not yet. Try that. Nope. Sorry. Now try it.
Was I that boring? I just put you to sleep. No, I'm joking.
No, I was trying to make my computer do other things, and I forget that you've got control too.
Okay. Anyway, so the big question, and I just wanted to set things up generally before we talk about Iron County. Ignore the stock market. We're just going to talk about what affects Iron County revenues and obviously local government. It's going to affect cities somewhat similar, and the state to different degrees. This was a graph from my 2020 budget presentation. This is the revenue distribution as a whole, aggregated all of our funds together of where our money comes from in Iron County. 35% is property tax, 19% in fines and fees, 11% sales tax, 11% PILT. That's a misleading number there, and I'll explain. Tourism tax, 7%. That's both tourism taxes together. Grants, 7%. Reimbursement and rents, 5%. Interest, 3%. Miscellaneous, 2%. I went through and I identified the revenues that we have that are market sensitive. And
sorry, I was trying to sneak in. I had.
Will somebody go and hold his hands behind.
Okay, now give that a try.
Does that mean you're not paying attention, John?
That's exactly what it means. I don't know what happened to my graph.
Okay.
I don't happen to my graph here. Something is.
Esther, and hold the phone up too.
Okay.
We need to.
What's that, Alma?
I told John to sit on his hands.
Somebody should. That's what my teachers always told me too.
I don't know what's happened to my graph here, John.
Yeah, that's all there is, it looks like.
So my graph is not showing the revenue streams that are sensitive. Something with switching it over, but basically we have sales tax and tourism tax and interest income are some of the ones that show up on here, which you're not seeing, which are unstable, and we're going to talk about those. First of all, we have safe and stable revenues. So what you're looking at is basically a 15-year look at property tax. In the light blue is the county's general fund property tax levy. In the gold is the municipal services fund property tax, which was year one was 2008. That's why there's no data before that. You'll notice there's 2 years that are anomalies. 2016 is that year I always talk about, and everybody looks at me with like a deer in the headlights. That was this anomalous year, which I won't go into, but let's pretend that it wasn't there, and you'll see this nice stable growth with property tax. That's one reason. Constitutionality of it, the question of property tax aside, one positive virtue of property tax is that it's very stable. You see 2008, 2009, there was not this crazy dip as the economy did what it did. Property tax is very stable. And that's a good thing if you're primarily funded with property tax, which we are. But less and less do governments rely on property tax because of the truth in taxation process. It's so painful politically and difficult to go through that process that governments, unfortunately or fortunately, however you look at it, have relied on other fees, increasing sales tax, increasing fees for this, and instituting new fees for that, doing transfers from enterprise funds because they do not want to raise property tax. That makes property tax a smaller and smaller source of our revenue. The disadvantage of that is it makes our revenue more volatile and more sensitive to the economy. I didn't do a grant. I did do one of these for PILT and for our fines and fees, but they look very similar to this. Fines and fees. When I say that, for example, we have our sheriff's department out writing tickets, right? And those fees are reliant upon how many tickets they write and how many tickets that our court system, the justice court, process, because we get a piece of that. It is volatile, but it is not the economy that drives it. It is other factors. We recently saw there was this big, huge drop, and it came from the fact that we took one deputy off the freeway who was very proficient in catching speeders and catching drug running and all of these things. When we pulled him off the freeway, our revenue dropped. Had nothing to do with the economy. And so not that there isn't a possible effect from that. For example, if we're not doing proactive policing due to COVID-19 and they're not writing tickets, then we will see that revenue drop. But by and large, most of our fines and fees.
While you're there, Dan.
Yeah.
Sorry to interrupt. Right now, well, for the last 3 weeks, traffic's been way less. So, and I don't expect that that's going to continue for a long, long time, but I'm guessing that there's less tickets being written because there's just less traffic out there. So it can have an immediate effect, but it will probably level out.
Well, and our court system is largely shut down too, and they're funded partially by tickets, but they will resurge as Mike Edwards and I were talking about. They will have a backlog, and they will get back to it. But yeah, there will be impacts. I talk about those unknown unknowns. We'll have some things that haven't reacted to previous downturns in the economy that this time they react. And so in our data, we haven't looked at it. One of the things we have never had in the history of modern economics is an engineered shutdown of the economy. We've never, on purpose, pressed the pause button. And so there'll be things that we have never expected before that will happen. Anyway, so that's it for our safe and stable revenues. These are the revenue sources that are more variable and less safe that react with the market. Sales tax, tourism taxes, gas tax, and building permit fees. We're going to talk about each of those. I lost control, John.
Oh, dang me. I can't get away with anything. Okay.
No, you can't.
Give it a shot.
I'm actually not even doing my normal presentation. I'm just, as soon as I see you do something, I just skip everything I was going to say and expose your shenanigans. So sales tax is the biggest concern by far. Sales tax is tied directly to consumer spending. The formula, the way it's calculated for local government is this. 50% of the revenue we get is based on the sales tax that is spent or that is collected in our geographic area, right? And then the other 50% of it comes from the total sales tax collected in the state and divvied out based on population. So if you are a bedroom community, which our municipal services district is, John, you can do all kinds of stuff because I'll be on this for a second.
That's okay. You misspelled stimulus.
Oh, did I? No, I didn't. That's actually the way that they spelled it back in Greek times.
Okay. Sorry, I don't mean to derail you.
There's supposed to be a little inye or some umlauts over the O there.
Okay.
Anyways, if you have a bedroom community that has like almost no stores that are doing business, you're still going to get sales tax because of the population that lives there, and that's why they do that, to try to equalize out the urban and rural counties and cities. Anyways, so it's directly tied to customer spending. We know that this will take a hit. Everybody hopes that'll be a 1/4 hit or a 2/4 hit. There's some industries that are thriving. If you'll notice, Walmart's stock price it's gone up and it's gone down, but it hasn't actually dropped lower than it was before this thing has happened. Walmart, these grocery stores have been selling out like crazy, and you have some businesses that are doing, mobile delivery and all these things. They are thriving. The net effect is still negative, no doubt, but it's not every single business has been impacted low. Amazon, as you remember, Utah struck a deal with Amazon about a couple of years ago that we are now charging sales tax on all Amazon goods. We'll get a piece of every one of those sales because of that and because of our population. So it's not all negative. You have all these effects, and some of them have a positive effect, some of them a negative effect. We know the overall effect will be negative, and I'll show you the sales tax graph here in a second, what happened in 2008, but it's not all negative. Plus, you have now the effect of the stimulus. You have people who have lost jobs, and now they're going to get money in their pocket. They're going to buy groceries, pay the bills that they absolutely have to pay, and the ones that they don't have to pay, they won't pay, right? So some of that's still going to be spent on sales tax. Then you have people that haven't lost their jobs. They just got extra money in their pocket. As long as they don't get mentally worried or freaked out and want to increase their savings rate, a lot of them are going to spend that money. So we don't know what that effect is going to look like, and it's going to be different demographics, do different things with that money. This is Keynesian, I can't say that word right now. Keynesian economics at its core, the concept of putting money into the end user's hands and then stimulating the economy that way. The flip side of that is you do the trickle down. You give it to the businesses and hoping that they'll then pay their people more. This is Keynesian economics at its core. There is an inverse effect of a savings rate on GDP and spending, meaning when you model America's GDP, the higher the savings rate is, the worse it is for our economy. So obviously we know savings is a good thing. But if people save and don't spend, it creates this problem for the economy. Therefore, it has an inverse relationship. I had to put one little joke in here. So my wife is a Keynesian, I can't say it. She's always spending herself out of depressions. So that's the goal here, right? Is we want to stimulate the economy. We want to get it into the end user's hands, and so they will spend it. Obviously, $1,200 if I'm a single individual that lost my job is not going to fix the economy, but it will have some sort of positive effect. This is the sales tax 2008 recession, what happened. Again, in blue you have our sales tax rate for the entire county, and then in gold you have the municipal service sales tax. That's a U right there. That's what you would define as a U recession. It's quite a beautiful thing in its predictability and its simplicity. You'll see our last few years have been great. The other thing you'll notice that is it bottomed out. It was about 15% drop from its high point. Will this recession look worse than that? Will it look better than that? Will it be a V? It'll pop down and pop back up. Will it drop 25%? Will it drop 5% because of the stimulus? I don't know. I can just show you what happened in 2008, and I can model it with some different things there. This was a percentage change on sales tax. As you can see, the last 10 years look pretty much like the national economy. Look like our job growth in the national economy, don't they? Okay, so now we get to tourism taxes. We have two tourism taxes. We have restaurant tax, which we call TRCC. That's made up of two drivers of that. We have our local spending, and we have our visitors or our tourist spending. I mean, our tourism tax, TRCC, doesn't differentiate. Money spent in restaurants pay a specific percentage, and Maria could tell us all about that. And we collect a percentage that goes into Fund 28, and we spend that in a very specific way. And we have hotel taxes, which is our TRT, or stands for transient room tax. And you can imagine what's happening with these. There is still some restaurant spending going on right now, and hotel tax, there's nothing going on. I mean, I don't think we've ever seen anything like this. In fact, Maria said that this, as she was watching the numbers, it was similar to 9/11, when everybody was same reasons, right? Fear. Only this, we're actually being told not to go anywhere and not to stay anywhere. So tourism taxes, I mean, they haven't dropped to zero, but you know right now they're taking the hardest hit, even more than sales tax.
Dan, some of these hotels are renting rooms by the month now. Are they? Will we get? Do they charge TRT on that? So
yeah,
we'll get some from that. We'll
get some. There's obviously some rentals of the Airbnbs and some of those things. There's this interesting thing that happens, and again, it comes back to the policies. When is this going to be relaxed? But in tourism, there's this pent-up demand that happens, and we can pray and hope that this will happen. People, for example, next week I'm supposed to be off on spring break with my family. My son's going on a mission here in the summer, and we were going to do a big family vacation before he leaves. And that's not happening. If things get relaxed, maybe we'll still do something, maybe not. When we go, what are we going to do? Trust me, we weren't going to go to Europe, but say we were financially well off and we were planning on going to Europe. Now you have this crazy outbreak, and even when things get relaxed, do I still feel comfortable going out of the country? Probably not. I'm probably going to travel domestically instead. So you get this pent-up demand thing that goes on. And I'm going to show you a graph in a minute that shows you this. It's really interesting. So we'll talk a little bit about pent-up demand in a second. Finally, the biggest question is, what about the effect of fear, social distancing, once it does relax? Our biggest tourism things in Iron County are summer activities. It's the summer games. You notice the trend here? Shakespeare and other these big events where we get all these people together. Well, let's say that we figure out a way to start open up the economy, and everybody comes up with a plan to operate their business with good social distancing. Is summer games, now it's in July, is that going to happen? Are they going to find a way to do that? Are people going to travel? Are we going to get 80% of what we had, or 50%? Are they going to cancel it this year? You know, what about Shakespeare? Are they going to sell every third seat in a place? I mean, what does that look like? We just don't know. But
and I was on a call with President Wyatt and a few other leaders in the community, and they're planning right now. They're planning on the summer games in Shakespeare happening.
Good.
Until drop dead day, they have to cancel.
So they absolutely can't do it.
Right.
So they're going to plan on
They're being
it.
very optimistic, which I'm very grateful for.
Yeah, good. Because that right there that will make or break our tourism tax for the year, is those summer events.
Yeah.
And what do they look like?
Their plan is to scale back on Shakespeare to bring in like 60 actors instead of 300. They'd have a scaled back schedule, but it's encouraging that they are planning to move forward with Shakespeare and summer games, and hopefully that will happen. They'll both happen.
Well, and maybe they extend the season a little bit. There's different creative ways. And again, if I live on the Wasatch Front and I was planning on going to Disneyland, which will Disneyland be open as soon as summer games? I would tend to think no. Maybe they go take in a play in southern Utah rather than go to Europe or go to Hawaii or go to Disneyland. They're going to have to pick their options. And so if we can have a way that is smart and practical and safe, we may have more demand than something else. Who knows? Again, big question marks. There is one thing to talk about tourism tax, and Paul very astutely asked this question. We do have one bond that is funded and paid for by our tourism taxes. It's the Shakespeare Center Bond. It is a CIB loan, and CIB has said that they will let us apply for a deferral, which would basically restructure the debt and just ignore this year's payment. And I think we would just restructure, add a year on the back end or something like that. So we're going to want to look at that because we pay for that payment with these two taxes. One thing that Maria has said is once we are able to open things back up, she is going to need every penny to basically stimulate tourism. That's what these taxes pay for, is advertising and facilities. It's the TRT tax is her operational budget plus advertising. The TRCC is all special projects. So TRCC will probably get hit the hardest. I take that back. TRT will get hit the hardest, which is her operational budget. And obviously it's not going to go to zero. But had we known, maybe we wouldn't have paid off some of the debt we paid off with these fund balances, but our fund balances are not healthy like some of our others. You know, we paid off a lot of the county's debt that could be paid off with these loans, and so we don't have these massive fund balances. We're just going to have to play it by ear and be very cautious, but we do need every penny that we have to try to stimulate the economy, try to get people to do tourism when that is available. So I think that I would recommend that we apply for at least a 1-year forbearance on that CIB loan that gets paid for by these. This was this was a perfect graph that showed the pent-up demand of travel. What we're specifically looking at here is the demand for outbound air tickets versus domestic room demand. So this was the SARS outbreak, which is similar. This is far worse. Not that that COVID-19 is worse than SARS. It's the effect on the economy is a totally of a whole different nature. But there was this pent-up demand. So what happened was international travel went way down, but you'll see that domestic room demand really didn't. Both of them spiked up after the end of the SARS outbreak. So there is a pent-up demand that happens, and hopefully people will resume, and they'll got to get out of the house after they've been locked up for a long time. This is our tourism tax, what happened in 2008. Again, I didn't have data to go back to 9/11. I would have had to get down into the paper records. We used a different software system that we do not have now, Cassell. The blue, you see the TRT rate increase that was done legislatively there. That's why that pops up there in 2007. The increase in 2016 was literally just demand. I mean, we just had a boom year, 2016. So you see the growth that's been happening there. You know, you're getting up to 1.4 million in TRT tax. And that's what we expected to get in 2020. I don't have a 2020's budget. You see the restaurant tax is a little more stable, but you see both of them did a little dip in 2008. It wasn't as sharp as sales tax, but again, 2008 was an economic depression. It was a housing collapse. It had nothing to do with fear and psyche. It just had to do with people traveling and spending money at restaurants and hotel rooms. This is the percentage change, same numbers. Okay, gas tax. There hasn't been a lot of talk about this, but this is a big one for municipalities and all of local government, really. So you had this weird thing that happened in probably the worst timing on planet Earth. Saudi Arabia and Russia picked a fight with each other, OPEC Plus, right as the COVID-19 was about to happen. They basically broke their alliance and just flooded the market with crude. I have the graph there. You see what it did to pricing. I think we dropped like 65%, the price of a barrel. This has been playing out in the news. Yesterday, Trump helped with a deal between the two, and they agreed to cut 10 million barrels. The problem is now it's not a supply problem, which it was. It started as a supply problem. Now we have a demand problem. Nobody's driving. In fact, a lot of economists say, well, thanks OPEC Plus for cutting 10 million barrels. By the way, U.S. isn't cutting any. Mexico is cutting 100,000 barrels. But now we have a demand problem. There's nobody driving, and so this cut of 10 million barrels is probably not even going to do anything in the long run. Of course, Russia is saying that you're welcome, America. We just saved you 1.2 million jobs, is what Russia is out there touting this deal. But anyways, so when it gets back to gas tax, how does this affect us? What drives our gas tax is gallons purchased. Not exclusively because of the new law that just went into effect a year or two ago. Now there is some percentage parts of the tax fee, but largely we get so many pennies per gallon. So what we want is gallons sold. That's one of the problems with electric vehicles is they're not buying any gas, and so now all of a sudden you're not collecting fuel tax to work on the roads. So regardless of what's going on with gas prices and regardless of what's going on with OPEC and all these things, what affects Iron County's revenue and hence how we're going to repair roads, and we subsidize it with our general fund, that's why this is important, is how many gallons are being bought. And right now it's in the tank, so to speak. It's not as bad because our economy we haven't been completely locked down. We're one of 8 or 9 states that isn't. So there is still driving going on, but the roads are a lot more freed up. So the question is once this COVID-19 gets released and now we have super cheap gas, how many gallons are going to be sold? I would think that the COVID-19 is going to have a downward pressure because less gallons are being sold right now. When things are lifted and we have really cheap gas, we may sell more gallons than normal, so it may end up helping us. But a lot of those gallons are bought by tourists, and if tourists aren't driving, if they're not coming here from California, then it will impact us. Thank goodness we're not in Uinta County, because when there's big gas shocks to the economy, you have their property tax is in a mess. Their whole economy suffers based on crude going up and down, and I know that the legislature is looking to help them out to the best that they can. So this is a cool graph. The yellow line is the gas price, the price of a gallon, and you'll see there's almost no correlation to what gas prices are doing and what our revenues are doing. Our revenues are in blue. You do see in 2009 there was a drop. Literally, people were not driving at the bottom of when the economy was dumped. There was a pullback in how many gallons people were buying. Other than that, it was fairly normal. You see why it gained in the last 4 years. That was the fuel tax increase and how it phased in and all of that stuff. So again, we can't look back to the previous recession and see the impact on fuel, but you see right now we're getting about $2 million. We subsidize that by about another $1 million, and that's just to maintain our roads. That's not new construction. So if we take a big hit there, that means it's going to have even more of a burden on our municipal services fund, which is what we largely subsidize our road fund from. Lastly, I'll talk about building permits. This is tied to the local housing market. Specifically, we collect a building permit on a new home that's built and the value of that home. Those are the only two things that drives that. And this is a very volatile revenue. This is probably the most volatile one that we have. In fact, I'm going to scoot forward and look at that's what happened in 2008, which was a housing bubble. But we went from collecting more than $800,000 in 2006 down to $100,000 in 2011. That's a $700,000 swing that goes into our municipal services fund. This is real money, and this goes into the general pot that is a municipal services fund that we fund our sheriff's department and our building maintenance and our building inspector, and we have a bunch of things that are located in that fund. $700,000 is $700,000. It doesn't have to be spent any specific way. That's just revenue that we pay employees with and so forth. So what does this look like to our local building market, which what runs that, right? Local demand, local new houses based on our population growth. There's probably some pent up demand, but a lot of new houses are speculative in nature, and so speculation gets hurt when the consumer psyche gets hurt, and so this is an unknown. Paul was talking to me this morning and says, there will probably be a delayed effect. It probably has to do with if the economy crashes and people, consumer confidence takes a hit. The people that may have been going to go out there on a limb and build a spec home may now decide to wait and see, right? That wait and see is what hurts us. One final comment. The Fed dropped interest rates. Now, these aren't the interest rates we pay. These are what they loan at the window that banks borrow, the overnight rate, right? They drop those to zero. We've never seen that happen ever. But usually interest rates follow that. So if interest rates do what we expect them to do, interest rates will come way down low. Now, when interest rates are low, that increases speculation. That increases people doing refinances, which don't affect our building permits, but people building homes and doing spec homes because they can borrow money for really low amounts. You can buy that $400,000 house if you have a stable income, and because you can get it so cheap, maybe now's the time to build. So that has a positive effect. Everything else has a negative effect. So what is it going to look like? Only time will tell. But there are multiple pressures on what's going on. That just wanted to point that out. Again, those were building permits. And by the way, 2015 was a high, and then you see it's kind of done another little U. These are really hard to forecast, by the way. Anyways, so I combined all of the revenues that are volatile, and I put together a couple of scenarios so you could see the ultimate potential impact to the county. Scenario A is identical, the percentage drops to 2008. Scenario B, it's less than 2008, what I'm going to call a little u, a lowercase u. It's not as bad as 2008. Scenario C is a dramatic shock followed by a rebound and then slow growth. Actually, I think I tweaked that one so that it's more of an L. So it just drops and then it kind of bumps back, and then we set on this new normal, right? This is what it looks like if you have the exact same as a 2008. Now keep in mind, this isn't the graph you're looking at is not the total revenue of the county. That's the combination of all of our revenues that are sensitive to market, right? The red is lost revenue versus a projected slow growth, which is what we were pretty much on. So that line across the top is assuming coronavirus never happened. That's how I would have forecast the next 5 years, right? So if 2008 recession happens again and the exact same percentages on those exact same revenues, that's what's going to happen. It's a $7 million loss over 5 years, which would be 3% impact to the total budget. Now, Washington County, I've talked to them. They expect far worse than this because they are hugely reliant on sales tax and tourism tax, far more than we are. The state's different picture. Cities are going to have different picture. Scenario B, that's 50% of the impact, which is about a $2.8 million loss spread over 5 years, a total decrease of 1.2 to our budget. Scenario C, this is this kind of this hybrid where we have a really bad year in 2020. It bounces back, not back to where it was, and then it has slow growth moving forward from that. Oh, I did do a scenario D with an L-shaped recession. That's what an L-shaped recession looks like. We have a major loss, and then it becomes our new normal, and then we just slowly grow from there. So which one of these is, and you know, it's only one of these possible four, right? The economy can only do one of those four. I'm joking. I just wanted to give you an impact of what this could look like from the county. And I'm sure there's probably a version of this scenario A that is twice as bad as the recession. So if it's twice as bad, that's $4 million total loss, and that's 6%, right? So when people ask, am I worried? Yes, I'm worried, but I'm not panicking. We're largely speaking very healthy overall as a county. Here's the problem. We have, 26 different funds that all have their own different unique sources of revenue, and some funds are going to be more sensitive to this than others. For example, our general fund, sales tax makes up 17% of its revenue, and we know we know that sales tax was about 15% of the total. I mean, it in 2008 took a 15% hit. That means that 15% of our general funds revenues, or 17% of our general funds revenues, are going to be sensitive at 15%. So it probably won't hit general fund too bad. Fund 11 has sales tax and building permits. Remember how big of a hit building permits took? And Fund 11 subsidizes the road fund. So the bigger the hit to the road fund, the bigger the hit to Fund 11. So Fund 11 is actually a lot more sensitive to this than Fund 10. Our road fund, fuel tax is 58% of its revenue, right? So if it takes a big hit, then again, that's tough. We may not maintain as many roads next year. We may decide to dig into our savings and continue to maintain just as many roads as we had. You know, you usually try to do the things that hurt the most at the last, meaning laying off employees usually wants to be your last option. But, you know, at the end of the day, it becomes a lot of decisions. Do we maintain less roads for 1 year? Do we not hire? Do we, you know, there's all these different options which we will look at in the fall as we deal with, you know, 2021's projections of what do we want to do? Do we hold off on buying new equipment? That seems to be an easy one. Do we hold off on a big capital project that we're planning on doing? That seems to be an easy one before you talk about layoffs, right? You take out those things which in a normal year you would do, but this year we're going to hold on. Again, we become the ones that then help to hurt the economy by stopping to spend. Fund 24, 71% of Maria's budget comes from the TRT tax. Other than that, it comes from grants, basically. Grants and TRT. Fund 28, 98% of that fund is restaurant tax. So Now, we don't operate with that. We do special projects, which means we'll just have that much less money to do special projects. So my recommendations are this. After looking at everything, I don't recommend that we do any budget adjustments. We open the budget, panic, pull stuff out. And we are financially strong. Unlike the federal government, we have been paying off debt and filling our allowable savings and our reserves, and we are financially probably stronger than Iron County has ever been. That's what you should do in times of good, right? We've had 10 great years, and we have our storehouses full, if you will. But I still think that our county departments need to be prudent. If there's something that's a questionable thing, they don't have to spend it this year, don't. Let's just hold off. Operate your department, do what you need to do, but if there's that thing that you don't need to do, don't. I'm going to keep an eye on revenues, sharper eye on it than I normally do. I'm going to keep watching stuff. I'm going to watch. Of course, there's a delayed effect with these things, and so, I don't know right now exactly what's going to happen. I mean, hopefully there's enough of a picture developing when it comes budget time in the fall, in September and in October when we're doing the budget, that we can get an idea of what is going to happen in 2021. I think we will know at least. What we won't know is a resurgence, and what would a resurgence do? And I don't think anybody is as worried about an economic impact as bad with a resurgence as they are with the first one. But we should have an idea of how bad a hit we took, at least in the short term by then. And we should have an idea of what the policies that we can plan on nationally and our state policies. And so we'll have a better idea that we can make a good decision. I would recommend, and I want to get the thoughts of the commissioners, we were planning on opening the budget and spending a couple of $1 million on our new fleet program. I don't think it's a great idea to do that right now, especially until we have an idea of what's going to happen. And I had one conversation with Paul, but not really much, and I haven't talked to Mike or Alma at all. But my thought is we put that on pause at least for a year, possibly 2. What do you guys think?
Well, as I've thought about it, I think that'd be very wise to hold off.
I thought about that. As you were talking, that's kind of the specific one expenditure that I was thinking of. With that being said, there might be a few vehicles out there that we've been kind of putting people off as far as getting a new vehicle because the new fleet program is coming. So overall, I think we got to put it off, but maybe we got to look at a couple of vehicles. Specifically, George's vehicle only made it partway to his destination the other day, then had to get towed the rest. There might be a couple of others out there but maybe we ought to look at replacing a few vehicles that are really necessary. I agree on holding up on the larger projects.
I know with our sheriff's department, we have quite an aged fleet. We are buying 6, but 6 is what we would buy in a normal year, and
right.
And that I know that. And then they've had a wrecked one. In fact, we have that question we have to answer right now. We're going to get an insurance check, which will pay for 30% of a new one, but you can't go buy 30% of a truck, so we got to figure that out. I know Dell is pulling out his hair trying to keep vehicles underneath officers right now, so we do need to look at our vehicles, but to go out and spend a couple million right now, I don't think it's wise, especially since the bulk of that purchase would come from Fund 11, which I'm thinking is going to be a little bit more sensitive to this recession. So okay, well, we'll continue to talk about that.
Dan, just so the public knows, this fleet purchase we're looking at, it's a one-time expenditure to get to that level. But after that, we're driving newer vehicles. It saves us money in the long term because we can buy a vehicle at state contract, actually drive it for, 2 years and sell it for more money oftentimes.
Yeah,
and so,
it's a wise thing. It's just cash is king, and do we want to let go of some cash right now?
Yeah, just so the public understands, that's kind of a one-time expense, and then it flattens out, right? And, and we actually save money over the long term.
Yeah, it would save us hundreds of thousands a year in maintenance and things like that. So I think we'll definitely want to do it, but again, you know,
Right.
the last thing you want to do is reduce your reserves right when.
I agree.
Anyways,
I think we're all.
I think we're all on the
I
same page.
agree. Yeah, I agree with everything that's been said as well. I don't think it would be prudent to go forward with the fleet program right now. However, it's definitely going to be something that will be beneficial in the future. And we had money. We're building a new road department shed, and we've got space in the old building for the fleet program. So that's kind of money in the bank, so to speak, until we're ready to go forward. But I think we're smart to hold off for a while.
Okay. So like I said, I'll continue to monitor the budget, and I'll send out an email to all the department heads. But if we could, I mean, there's some spending that's not happening just because we can't travel. We can't do trainings. We can't do a lot of the things we were planning on doing. I think Paul's going to want to look real closely with our, we spent a lot of money with our building department on upgrades and those things, and we'll want to just make sure we're wise, just like we always are. But right now we'll want to, you know, is this something we absolutely have to do right now? And if not, maybe we hold off. But if it's still prudent to do it, you know, sometimes you jump over $1 to pick up a dime. So we want to make sure we still are smart with our decisions. So
Well, and in the new road shed building that Commissioner Adams mentioned, we were fortunate enough to sell a building that we had there at the Main Street and Fiddler's Canyon for enough money to pay for that. So that was a nice thing. So.
And I think it's also important to point out that as we are spending money doing the things we need to do, a lot of that money goes to contractors and to small businesses that we do business with. And if we hold up, then that exacerbates the problem. So it's everybody being extra cautious that creates the new problem of the economy. So we got to keep that in mind as we do this. If we're impacted not as badly as some of the others, but then we overreact and we're extra careful, then we're actually we're contributing to the problem. So we want to make sure that we're smart, but we continue to operate and continue to do business with our local vendors. So so that's it. That's my recommendations for the 2020 budget. For 2021, we'll take a really close look at the situation. You know, if you look back at 2008. I'm going to go to this sales tax image. How did we get through that? Well, there was pause on new hiring. There wasn't any raises. And it was pretty much business as usual. If it looks like that and we do the same things, we'll just come through it smelling like a rose. In fact, I would argue that we probably were overcautious in 2008, which is why we had some of that really healthy fund balances that we had, because I don't know if the commissioners maybe had a sharp picture, and so we're being a little overcautious. So anyways, I'll just throw that out there. I'm not freaking out.
It was a tough time. Revenues were definitely down, and so we were very cautious. And I sincerely hope we don't have to reduce force, but we need to watch really close and see if we want to implement a hiring freeze at some point. But I sincerely hope we don't have to reduce force in any way.
And I will continue to get you guys good information so you can make decisions based on good data and not just shooting from the hip. But Iron County will get through this. And I think we'll be okay, assuming it doesn't turn into even a worse scenario, than I've even showed here. So I'm grateful to be an Iron County auditor rather than a auditor in some of these places that are being hit really hard or are just absolutely dead freezing everything. It would be panic time. I mean, it really would be rough. So I thank my lucky stars, and I think that we have things good. And I leave policy and politics to you guys, but that's pretty much all the information that I have. If there's any questions or thoughts or anything else, I I turn that time back to you.
Well, I'd just like to say that as a commission, we're extremely grateful for Dan for his insight.